The first time I stepped into her lab, it felt like walking into another world. The air was heavy with 1,000 invisible threads of fragrance, each one pulling at some hidden memory I didn't know I had. The walls were lined with delicate bottles and vials, each filled with liquid light that caught the glow of the soft lamps above. My heartbeat seemed to quicken as I stood there, not because of the scents, but because of her. She stood across the room, adjusting her glasses, her lab coat slightly open at the collar as if she didn't care about appearances, only about the magic she was creating. I told myself I was here only for the fragrance test, but the truth was, I was here because being near her made the world sharper, warmer, and unbearably alive. Her voice reached me before her smile did, calm, soft, but with a strange undertone that always felt personal. She explained how the test would go, how I would smell different blends, how my reactions would guide her research. But all I could think about was the way her voice lingered in the air like its own perfume, brushing against my skin as if it belonged to me. When she gestured for me to sit, my knees trembled just a little. I forced a smile, trying to look casual, but my chest felt like it was burning from the inside out. She was a scientist surrounded by beauty, and I was just one more experiment in her day. Yet, to me, every second felt charged, like the electricity before a storm. As she placed the first vial in front of me, I noticed how steady her hands were, though her fingers brushed against mine briefly as I reached for the strip of paper she had dipped into the scent. That touch was fleeting, almost accidental, but it sent a wave of warmth through me that no perfume could match. I lifted the strip to my nose, breathing in deeply. The fragrance was sweet, like flowers opening at dawn, but underneath it was a darker, heavier note that made me think of secrets whispered in the dark. She asked what I felt, and I tried to find the right words, stumbling over them because I wasn't just describing the fragrance, I was describing her. She tilted her head, studying me, as though my answer mattered more than any chart or record. With each vial she introduced, I felt myself slipping further into her orbit. Sometimes she would lean closer, pointing out the way a top note faded into a middle, or how the base held everything together. Each time, her hair would fall forward slightly, brushing her cheek, and I'd have to remind myself to breathe. The lab wasn't quiet. Machines hummed softly in the background, air filters whirred, but in my memory, it felt silent, like every sound was muffled under the weight of the space between us. I could smell roses, citrus, spices, but all of it seemed to blur together because her presence overpowered everything. I kept noticing small details about her, the way she bit her lip when she waited for my response, the slight smudge of ink on her fingers where she had written something earlier, the faint, natural scent of her skin underneath all the perfumes. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was there, and it made me dizzy in a way no fragrance had ever managed. I wondered if she knew. I wondered if she could sense how my chest tightened when she leaned in, or how my words faltered when she smiled too long. She seemed focused, professional, but there was something in her eyes when she looked at me, a glimmer I couldn't name. By the time she set the final vial down, I had almost forgotten why I was really there. It wasn't about science anymore. It was about the way my world had shifted since stepping into her lab, about how everything in me leaned toward her as though pulled by gravity. I inhaled the last fragrance, describing it as best I could, but inside I wasn't thinking about vanilla, or musk, or lavender. I was thinking about how close her hand was to mine, about how her breath moved the air between us, about how I wanted to ask her something but couldn't find the courage. The test ended, but for me, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't name yet, something that smelled not of roses or spice, but of her, only her. She asked me if I was ready for the next round, and though my mouth said yes, the rest of me was trembling. There was something about the way she looked at me now that felt different, as if I had already revealed more than I intended. She handed me another testing strip, her fingers lingering an extra second before letting go, and I couldn't ignore the warmth that passed between us. I raised it to my nose, inhaling slowly, but even before the fragrance reached me, I could feel her eyes on me, studying me not just as a subject but as if she were searching for something hidden beneath my skin. The scent itself was light, citrusy, the kind that makes you think of open skies and fresh beginnings, but what struck me most wasn't the perfume, it was the silence that followed, the way she waited for my reaction like it mattered more than anything she had done in her career. I tried to focus on the smell, describing the sharpness of lemon and the soft sweetness that followed, but my voice caught halfway through. She tilted her head, smiling faintly, as if she could see right through me. That smile was dangerous, it was gentle enough to make me want to trust her, but deep enough to make my chest ache. She asked softly, "Does it remind you of anything?" And the truth was, it reminded me of her energy, her quiet brightness that cut through the heaviness of the world. But I couldn't say that, not yet. Instead, I muttered something about childhood summers and gardens, avoiding her gaze, because if I looked too long, I was afraid she would know everything I was trying to hide. She leaned closer, not letting the silence swallow us. Her voice was low when she spoke again, explaining how citrus was often the note of first impressions, the kind of scent that makes people pay attention without realizing why. As she spoke, I wasn't hearing her words as much as I was hearing the unspoken layers beneath them. First impressions. Fresh beginnings. Was she only talking about perfume, or was there something else in her tone that I wasn't imagining? The closeness between us grew heavier with each passing second. She pointed to another vial, dipping a new strip, her hands graceful, almost tender, as though she wasn't just handling chemicals but something alive, delicate, needing care. When she held it out to me, our hands brushed again, and this time neither of us pulled away quickly. The scent rose up between us, warm, rich, with hints of spice and something darker underneath. It was more mature, more intense, the kind of fragrance that clings to the air long after the wearer has gone. I breathed it in, and it felt like falling into something I couldn't control. My chest tightened as I spoke, words tumbling out about passion and heat, about fire hidden under the surface. Her eyes flickered at that, and for a heartbeat, I saw something raw break through her calm exterior. She wrote something down, her pen moving fast, but her attention wasn't on the paper. It was still on me, measuring every shift in my face, every hesitation in my breath. The further we went, the less it felt like a test. It was turning into a conversation without words, one that took place in the air between us, in the way our shoulders leaned unconsciously closer, in the way her smile lingered too long when I struggled to put a feeling into language. She asked me to describe another scent, but by then, all I could do was describe the emotions rising in me, the pull of nostalgia, the warmth of desire, the ache of wanting something just out of reach. She didn't laugh, didn't dismiss me. Instead, she nodded slowly, her lips pressing together as if she understood completely, as if she had been waiting for me to say it. Her lab, with all its bottles and quiet machinery, felt like it was holding its breath. I could no longer separate the perfumes from her presence. Every strip she gave me, every fragrance I inhaled, was tangled with the way her hair brushed her cheek, with the soft crease at the corner of her mouth when she smiled, with the way her gaze lingered on me as if I was the only thing in the room. I wanted to believe she felt it too, that the spark I sensed wasn't one-sided, but I was terrified of being wrong. Still, as she reached for the next vial, her hand trembling just slightly for the first time, I realized she wasn't as unshakable as she seemed. And that tiny tremor was enough to make my heart believe there was something more happening here than science. The room felt warmer now, though nothing in it had changed. The bottles still lined the walls, the machine still hummed, but everything between us carried a weight I hadn't expected. She handed me another strip, this one carrying a scent that at first seemed simple, soft, floral, almost innocent, but as it unfolded, layers came through, richer, deeper, pulling me somewhere I didn't want to leave. I closed my eyes without realizing it, letting the fragrance sink into me, and as I did, a memory surfaced. I thought of a night long ago, standing outside in the rain, laughing with someone who made me feel seen for the first time. That memory was fragile, but now, with her in front of me, it became something more. I opened my eyes to find her watching me closely, not with the detached look of a researcher, but with the quiet intensity of someone who wanted to understand my heart as much as my words. When I tried to describe what I felt, my voice cracked. I spoke of laughter, of the way scents can pull you back to moments you thought were gone forever. She leaned forward, listening like every syllable mattered. Her closeness filled me with a strange mix of peace and tension, a calm storm building inside me. She smiled, faintly, but there was something in her eyes, soft, almost longing, that made my stomach twist. It wasn't professional anymore. It wasn't just about the test. This was two people circling something they didn't yet have the courage to touch. Her hand brushed against mine again as she collected the strip, and this time I didn't pull away. Neither did she. The touch was small, but it lingered in my skin long after it ended, like the way some scents stay even after the air clears. She looked down quickly, pretending to write notes, though her hand shook slightly. For the first time, she seemed less like the composed scientist and more like a woman caught off guard by something she hadn't planned for. That realization sent a rush of heat through me. She wasn't unreachable. She wasn't untouchable. She gave me another sample, this one darker, heavier, carrying notes that reminded me of smoke and velvet, something that wrapped around you and didn't let go. As I inhaled, another memory flickered, a late-night conversation, laughter turning into quiet silence, the moment just before a kiss that never happened. I spoke about desire without meaning to, about heat and closeness, about the way some things burn in your chest until you can't keep them hidden anymore. My words slipped out before I could stop them, and when I glanced up, her expression had shifted. She wasn't just listening, she was feeling it too. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. The air between us thickened. Each breath felt like a choice, a step closer or a step away. I wondered if she could hear how fast my heart was beating, if she could smell the nervousness in my skin. The perfumes blurred together now, becoming less about their individual notes and more about the unspoken language weaving itself between us. Every strip she held out, every time her fingers brushed mine, it felt like we were building something fragile but undeniable. I tried to convince myself it was just the setting, the intimacy of being in a room filled with scents meant to stir emotions. But the truth was, the strongest fragrance wasn't in any of the bottles. It was her, always her, a presence that clung to me like the deepest bass note, impossible to shake. For a moment, our eyes met and didn't look away. It was only a second, but it felt longer, stretched thin by everything unsaid. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, what she was feeling, but the words froze in my throat. Instead, I smiled, small and shaky, and she smiled back, softer than before, almost shy. That look carried more than any confession could. I realized then that something had shifted permanently. We weren't just in a lab conducting a test. We were standing at the edge of something dangerous, something beautiful, and both of us knew it. Neither of us said it out loud, but it was there, lingering in the air, as clear and undeniable as the perfume on my skin. The longer I stayed in that room, the more I felt like the air itself was shifting, bending around us in ways I couldn't explain. The scents she offered me were beautiful, layered, carefully crafted, yet none of them seemed to matter anymore. I realized my focus wasn't on the strips she placed in my hand, but on her, on the way her movements slowed as the test went on the way her breathing seemed to mirror mine, on the pauses that grew heavier with each passing moment. She dipped another strip, handed it to me, but before I lifted it to my nose I caught the faintest trace of something else in the air. It wasn't from any bottle on the shelves, nor from the vials scattered across the table. It was her natural scent rising through the mix, subtle but strong enough to drown out everything else. My chest tightened as if I had finally found the fragrance I had been searching for without even knowing it. I inhaled the strip quickly, but it felt almost meaningless compared to the presence that hovered beside me. She leaned in, asking what I thought, her voice low, careful, as though she already knew my mind wasn't on the paper anymore. The perfume was woody, with a hint of smoke, a grounding kind of smell meant to steady you, but I couldn't answer the way she expected. My words stumbled, describing not the scent itself but the feeling of being anchored, of being drawn in, of something you wanted to hold on to without reason. Her eyes lingered on me when I spoke, and for the first time, she didn't write anything down. She simply watched me, her pen hovering above the notebook as though she had forgotten the purpose of this entire test. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was alive. Her gaze held mine, and I could feel the truth pulsing between us, too loud to ignore. I tried to look away, but my eyes betrayed me, sliding back to her face, to the faint curve of her lips that threatened to turn into a smile she couldn't quite allow. When her hand brushed against mine again, it wasn't accidental. The touch was deliberate, unhurried, as if she was daring herself to see how far she could go before I pulled away. But I didn't. I couldn't. My skin burned where her fingers rested, the kind of heat no fragrance could mask. She drew in a breath, almost like she was steadying herself, and then whispered, "Strange. I keep noticing something." Her voice shook slightly, betraying her usual calm. I asked her what she meant, though I already knew. She hesitated, glanced at the bottles around us, then back at me. "There's a scent in here I can't quite place," she said softly. "It doesn't come from any of these." Her words sank into me, heavy and trembling, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to confess everything all at once. I swallowed hard, but nothing came out. I could only sit there, motionless, while her admission hung in the air like a secret too fragile to name. The test went on, or at least she pretended it did. She handed me another strip, though her hand lingered longer this time, her fingers resting against mine until the moment felt endless. I lifted the strip, inhaled, but all I could smell was her skin, her presence, her warmth mingling with the perfume. The air was saturated with her in a way no vial could reproduce. I described something vague, almost meaningless, but she didn't correct me. Instead, she leaned back slowly, her eyes never leaving mine, and for the first time I saw vulnerability in her. She wasn't the confident, composed scientist anymore. She was just a woman, caught in the same storm that had consumed me since I walked into her lab. The distance between us felt smaller, almost non-existent. Every movement carried weight now, the way she adjusted her glasses, the way her lips parted as if to speak but stopped, the way her hand trembled ever so slightly when she reached for another vial. I wanted to close the space, to reach out and hold her, to tell her I knew what she meant, that I felt it too, but fear kept me frozen. Fear of shattering the delicate balance we had created, fear of saying the wrong thing and watching her retreat back into professionalism. Still, as she leaned closer once more, her shoulder brushing against mine, I knew the balance had already been broken. Something new had taken root between us, something alive and undeniable. And no matter how much we pretended to focus on the perfumes, the truth was already filling the room. The scent she couldn't identify was me, and the one I couldn't escape was her. Her words kept circling in my mind, looping endlessly like a melody that wouldn't fade. "There's a scent in here I can't quite place." I tried to act as though it meant nothing, but every glance, every brush of her hand told me otherwise. I could feel her restraint slipping away, the layers of professionalism falling one by one, and what was left was something raw, something that scared me as much as it thrilled me. She offered me another strip, but my fingers didn't move to take it right away. Instead, I looked at her, really looked, and the air between us grew so tight that breathing felt like a risk. She blinked slowly, her eyes soft but unsteady, and then, almost in a whisper, she admitted, "I think it's you." The words were simple, but they hit me like a wave. My chest tightened, my pulse rushed to my ears, and I couldn't stop the flush rising to my cheeks. I thought I had imagined it all, thought maybe I was building castles out of glances and silences, but here she was, breaking through the fog with one fragile confession. My hands trembled as I set the strip down, unable to pretend anymore. "Me?" I asked, barely above a whisper, as if the question itself might shatter her courage. She nodded once, quick and almost shy, and then laughed softly, a nervous laugh that seemed so unlike her. "It sounds ridiculous," she said, "but it's true. Every time you walk in here, it changes the room. I notice it before anything else. I notice you before anything else." I couldn't answer at first. My throat felt locked, my body caught between wanting to run and wanting to move closer until nothing separated us. I thought about all the moments that had led to this, the lingering touches, the steady gaze, the way her voice always softened when she spoke to me, and suddenly everything made sense. I reached for words but only managed fragments. I thought, maybe I was imagining it. "The way you looked at me." "The way," I trailed off, embarrassed, but she shook her head quickly. "No," she said, firm this time, her voice steadier. "You weren't imagining it." The silence that followed was heavier than anything before, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, expectant, like standing at the edge of something vast. She set her pen down, sliding the notebook aside, as if to say none of this mattered anymore. What mattered was right here, between us. She leaned in slightly, her hair falling across her cheek, and I caught the faintest trace of her scent mingling with mine. It was intoxicating in a way no vial could ever be. I felt my breath hitch, my body pulling toward her before I could think better of it. "I don't know what this means," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I'm supposed to feel this way here, like this." She looked at me, her eyes steady now, and whispered, "Maybe we're not supposed to." "But I do." The honesty in her voice undid me. It stripped away the walls I had been holding up, leaving me bare and trembling. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to throw myself into her arms all at once, but instead I just stared at her, letting her words sink into the deepest part of me. She reached out then, hesitating for the briefest moment before placing her hand gently over mine. The contact was electric, not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it was real. Her thumb brushed across my skin in the lightest movement, and it felt more powerful than any kiss could have been. I met her gaze, and in that second I saw everything she had been holding back: longing, fear, tenderness, and something else, something that felt dangerously close to love. My body leaned instinctively toward her, the space shrinking until I could feel the warmth of her breath against my face. "I've tested hundreds of scents," she murmured, her voice trembling against the silence, "but none of them ever made me feel like this." My heart twisted, aching in the sweetest way. I wanted to tell her that I felt the same, that her presence had already marked me more deeply than any fragrance could, but my words failed me. Instead, I let the silence speak, let the closeness and the heat between us carry what I couldn't say aloud. Her hand tightened slightly over mine, and though the moment stretched endlessly, it felt unbreakable. Everything around us, the shelves, the vials, the soft hum of the machines, faded into the background. There was only her and the truth that had finally broken through. She had found her favorite scent, and somehow, impossibly, it was me. I wanted to hold that moment forever, to let it wrap around me like a perfume that never faded, one I could breathe in every day until I became a part of it. I didn't know what would come next, didn't know if the world outside this room would understand or accept what we were feeling, but right then, none of it mattered. What mattered was the way her fingers laced slowly through mine, the way her eyes softened as if they had finally found what they were searching for, and the way my entire being whispered the same truth back to her without needing words. The world outside might as well not have existed. The hum of her machines, the faint rattle of glass against glass, even the shifting of air through the vents, all of it blurred into nothing compared to the closeness between us. Her hand was still wrapped around mine, warm and steady now, no longer hesitant, and I realized I didn't want her to ever let go. My pulse was rushing so hard I thought she could feel it through my fingertips. She lifted her eyes to mine, and for the first time there was no mask, no veil of professionalism, no carefully measured distance. It was her, unguarded and vulnerable, looking at me like she had just found something she never thought she would. I wanted to tell her everything, how I had thought of her long before this day, how her laughter stayed with me when I was alone, how stepping into her lab felt like stepping into a secret world where I finally belonged. But the words tangled inside me, too clumsy, too small for the weight of what I felt. Instead, I let myself lean closer, closing the space inch by inch until I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. She didn't move away. She didn't even blink. Her breath touched mine, soft and uneven, and the quiet in the room grew louder, heavier, until it was almost unbearable. "You change everything," she whispered suddenly, her voice breaking the silence but not easing the tension. Her words sent a shiver through me. They weren't grand or rehearsed, they sounded like they had slipped out before she could stop them. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, though I didn't know why. Maybe it was the relief of knowing she felt what I felt, or maybe it was the terror of realizing how deeply I had fallen. I squeezed her hand, the smallest gesture but all I could manage, and in that moment it said more than any confession could. She shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing against mine, and the contact was enough to unravel me. The fragrances that had once filled the lab now seemed like faint ghosts compared to the richness of her presence. I caught the scent of her skin, warm, clean, alive, and it anchored me, made me dizzy with the realization that this was real, not just some dream I had spun from stolen glances. I breathed her in as though she were the only air left, and maybe she was. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly, my voice trembling. The honesty spilled out before I could stop it. "I don't know what this means, or what happens next. But I know I don't want to pretend anymore." Her grip on my hand tightened, firm and reassuring, and when she looked at me, her eyes held the same fear but also the same courage. "Me too," she said, almost in a breath. "I've been trying to ignore it, to bury it under rules and reasons, but it's stronger than me. Stronger than anything I've felt before." Her words broke something open inside me. I felt the walls I had built crumble, and in their place rose something pure and overwhelming. I leaned my forehead against hers, closing my eyes, letting the closeness speak what neither of us could fully say. The simple touch was more intimate than any kiss, more binding than any promise. It was the meeting of two people who had been circling each other for too long, finally colliding in a way that felt inevitable. Time seemed to stretch and bend. I don't know how long we stayed like that, seconds, minutes, maybe hours, but it felt eternal. Her thumb traced slow circles against my hand, calming and steady, grounding me in a way that nothing else ever had. I wanted to freeze the moment, to live inside it forever. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, not because the world outside had changed, but because I wasn't facing it alone anymore. She was there, with me, and that was enough. When she finally pulled back just slightly, her eyes searched mine, as if asking for permission, for confirmation that this wasn't a mistake. I answered with a small nod, barely more than a breath, and that was all she needed. Her other hand rose slowly, brushing a strand of hair from my face, her touch gentle, reverent, as though she was afraid I might vanish if she wasn't careful. My heart ached with the tenderness of it. In that touch, in her gaze, in the trembling closeness of our bodies, I realized we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And I didn't want to go back. The next days blurred together, yet every moment felt sharper, heavier, like the world had taken on a new depth. I left her lab that night with her touch still imprinted on my skin, and no matter how much I tried to distract myself, her presence followed me like a second heartbeat. I could smell her on my clothes, faint and fleeting but undeniable, and each time I caught it, it felt like being pulled back into the room where everything changed. I thought about the way her voice had broken when she confessed, about the trembling steadiness of her hand when she held mine, about the warmth of her forehead resting against mine. Those memories lived with me, haunting and healing at the same time, making me ache for more while reminding me of what I already had. we didn't talk about what had happened immediately. When I returned for another session, she carried herself with the same careful grace, her lab coat perfectly in place, her notebook open, her pen poised. But underneath the surface, everything was different. I could see it in the way her eyes lingered too long when she looked at me, in the way her fingers hesitated when handing me a strip of paper, in the slight flush that colored her cheeks when our hands touched. It was subtle, but I felt it in every inch of my body. The test continued, but neither of us was really paying attention to the vials anymore. The scents were nothing compared to the silent conversation running between us, a thread so strong that it pulled tighter with every passing moment. Outside the lab, I found myself reaching for her in the smallest ways. A message late at night, not about perfumes or tests, but about nothing at all, just to see her reply. An excuse to bring her coffee, though I told myself it was practical, just kindness, when in truth it was the need to see her smile. She responded in kind, careful at first, but slowly growing bolder. One evening she slipped a tiny vial into my hand as I was leaving, her fingers brushing mine longer than necessary. "It's just something I made," she said lightly, but her eyes told me it meant more. I uncapped it later when I was alone, and the fragrance hit me like a memory I had never lived before. It smelled like comfort and warmth, like longing and belonging all at once, and underneath it all was something that unmistakably reminded me of her. Our bond deepened quietly, like a flame that grows without anyone noticing until it's already burning everything around it. She became the scent that filled my days and nights. Her perfume lingered on my wrist where she had once touched me. Her laugh echoed in my chest long after we parted. I started to realize that she wasn't just part of my life anymore, she was changing me, shaping me in ways I hadn't thought possible. I felt braver, more alive, as though her presence had unlocked something hidden inside me. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see myself anymore. I saw someone who carried her, someone who had been marked by her in ways too deep to wash away. One evening, when the lab was empty except for the two of us, I found the courage to speak the truth I had been carrying. "You've given me more than a scent," I said softly, my voice trembling but certain. "You've given me a reason to feel again." She froze, her pen slipping from her fingers, and then she looked at me with such intensity that my breath caught. "You don't know what you've done to me," she whispered back. "I thought I had everything under control. But since you walked in, I can't stop thinking about you. You've become the center of it all." Her admission lit something inside me, a mix of fear and joy that left me trembling. I reached for her hand, and she let me, her fingers intertwining with mine like they were always meant to be there. We didn't kiss, not yet. We didn't need to. The intimacy between us had already surpassed that. Every look, every word, every breath we shared was a promise in itself, a vow that neither of us had to speak aloud. I realized then that what we had wasn't fragile, it was powerful, unshakable, the kind of connection that could withstand anything outside those walls. Walking out of her lab that night, I felt different. The world smelled different. The air was brighter, sharper, more alive, because she was part of it now. I carried her with me in every step, in every heartbeat, in every breath. It wasn't just love blooming in silence. It was strength, a reason to face the world with my head held higher. She had found her favorite scent, and I had found my home in her. And though we didn't say it yet, though the words hung unspoken between us, I knew the truth as surely as I knew the rhythm of my own pulse. We were already bound together, and nothing could undo it. The day I finally understood what she meant when she said her favorite scent was me did not arrive in a single moment, but in a collection of quiet ones strung together until they became undeniable. Weeks passed, and what began as a test in her lab turned into something much deeper. We still sat across from each other with vials and strips, still spoke about notes and layers, but underneath it all, another language grew, one written in the pauses between words, the soft glances that lasted too long, the touches that lingered as though neither of us wanted them to end. She gave me a fragrance one evening that she said was unfinished, a blend she had been struggling with. When I uncapped it, I understood why she couldn't complete it alone. It was incomplete because I was the missing piece. The bass note reminded me of her warmth, the middle of her quiet strength, and the top of something bright and alive, something that felt like me. Together, it became whole, as though the formula was always meant to hold both of us. The world outside wasn't always kind. There were questions from others, the unspoken rules of her work, the weight of what it meant to love in a way not everyone would understand. But we carried it anyway, hand in hand, scent in scent, creating a space where we could breathe freely. She told me once, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that she had spent years hiding her feelings, convincing herself that love like this would never be hers. I listened, my chest aching, and then I told her the truth I had once been too afraid to admit, that I had felt the same, that I had thought I was destined to watch from the outside while others lived the kind of love I longed for. We sat together in that confession, and it bound us more tightly than any promise could. Her lab became our sanctuary. It wasn't just a place for experiments anymore, it was the space where we discovered each other, where love bloomed between glass bottles and glowing lamps, where silence held more weight than speech. Sometimes, she would lean back from her work, watching me instead of the vials, and whisper something soft like, "You're the only fragrance I need." Each time, it left me breathless, not because of the words alone, but because I could see the truth of them in her eyes. I found myself whispering back, "And you're the only home I've ever wanted," and she would smile that quiet, secret smile that felt like it belonged only to me. The more time passed, the more I understood that she hadn't just chosen me as her favorite scent. She had chosen me as her companion, her equal, her love. And in return, I chose her, not out of desperation, but out of recognition. We fit together like notes in a fragrance, different, distinct, but incomplete without one another. Our story wasn't about a single test, a single confession, or a single touch. It was about the way we grew into each other slowly, like a perfume that deepens over time, revealing new layers the longer you breathe it in. One night, as we sat in the quiet of her lab long after the work was done, I rested my head on her shoulder. She pressed a kiss to the top of my hair, soft and lingering, and whispered, "You've changed my life." My eyes filled with tears, not from sadness but from the overwhelming beauty of being truly seen, truly cherished. I whispered back, "And you've given me the courage to be myself." We didn't need grand declarations. That simple exchange was enough, a vow spoken in the language we had built together. From that moment on, I carried her with me everywhere, not just in memory or thought, but in the very air I breathed. Her scent clung to my clothes, to my skin, to the spaces we shared, until it became a part of me. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that she would carry me the same way. Our love wasn't just a fragrance to be bottled or tested. It was living, shifting, impossible to contain, and yet it was ours, woven into every touch, every word, every heartbeat. She had discovered her favorite scent, and I had discovered mine, and in that discovery we found not only each other but ourselves. And that truth, tender and unshakable, was something no one could ever take away.